One here. Okay, good morning again. And this is our sixth session of wandering through the spiritual exercises. And I'm going to be doing a fair amount of summarizing today, but the real focus is on this idea of primary purpose. And so I'm going to talk about primary purpose initially with regard to AA, and then the slant that Saint Ignatius brings to that. So, and we've talked about this all before. None of this is new. Um, uh, the first time you hear primary purpose is in the preamble to our meetings, where it will say the primary purpose of this meeting is to stay sober and help another alcoholic achieve sobriety. And that's been very important to me because I'm a fairly demanding person. I've always wanted a lot out of my life, and I want a lot out of whatever situation I'm in. And when I would go to meetings because I needed something or I wanted to get something, I would often feel disappointed by the meeting, let down a little bit. It just didn't get to the level of interaction that I had hoped for, say. And when my sponsor pointed out that, well, that's the primary purpose of the meeting is not to bring you to a spiritual awakening. That's the primary purpose of the meeting is to stay sober and help another alcoholic. And that really has made it easier for me to go to a meeting without expectations, because that's a I don't want to say low bar. I don't mean that. It's actually a very high bar, but it's not um, it accomplishes that mission unless something goes dreadfully wrong. It will accomplish that mission. So then you get to other things like, well, what's the purpose of the traditions? And the purpose of the traditions is to govern our business meetings so we don't destroy ourselves from within through resentment, fear, and remorse. And so it does. The traditions do a lot of things to keep our fellowship within these certain rails, uh, guardrails. And one of them is we take money, property, and prestige out of the deal. You don't you don't come into AA or participate in it if you want to make some money, or you want a sense of prestige, or anything. But we don't own any property. We rent church basement rooms or make contributions and it's really wonderful that it does that, and the traditions keep us from they encourage us toward group conscience, which is a wonderful concept and really a true democracy. We encourage dissent. We'll talk about basically a fairly silly item for a long time in a business meeting. A lot of the time about the coffee or the I don't know what, but um, but then when you get to the steps and you start asking yourself, well, what is the primary purpose of the steps? And even the next level is, well, what is the primary purpose of my life? And I am telling you from my experience that the clearer I am about my primary purpose in any situation, whether I'm driving to the airport or I'm going to a meeting or I'm meeting one-on-one with somebody or I'm trying to engage in my prayer life or reading some spiritual material, if I am aware of my primary purpose, the situation can't fail, can't go wrong. I don't get into the kind of trouble when I come at a situation with a inappropriate primary purpose. So going to the steps, if you say, well, what is the primary purpose of the steps? I think you'll wind up saying um, that the primary purpose of the steps is to come to a spiritual awakening so that I can carry a message and practice principles. That's what step 12 says. Now, if you back up and you take the view that we do 1 through 9 in order to get to 10, 11, and 12 on a constant basis, and we talk about breaking it down into 4 words: pause, ask and listen, and then do in accordance with what you hear in the asking and listening. Well, the pause is step 10. The asking and listening is step 11, where the asking part is we're putting out our concern about our life or our relationship or our work life or whatever it, or our children, whatever it is. And then the doing is step 12 in accordance with what we get when we're in step 11. Well, if you back that down a little further, I would say, at least for me, that the primary purpose of the steps is for me to seriously engage in step 11, which is saying, praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. That's a, excuse me, that's a huge goal. Um, and what has happened for me in my 15 years in AA is, particularly as I went through this depression, which is extremely relevant to Saint Ignatius, because he doesn't call it depression, he calls it desolation, but it's the same stuff. And making this distinction between desolation and consolation, consolation is when I'm in sync with God, and I know that because I have feelings of faith and hope and love. And desolation is the opposite. I'm out of sync with God, and I know that because I have feelings of doubt. I have feelings of despair. What's the use? And I have feelings of fear. I'm frightened by something in my life. And so I'm deep into desolation, and nothing seems to be working. Drug doesn't work. I tried a couple of antidepressants. Um, I would go to therapy, but that wasn't really working, for me anyway. My sponsor said double everything up, and I did. I started, but at any rate, what I really learned in this depression was that my real problem, my real lack of power, we agnostics says our dilemma is lack of power. And it doesn't say over ourselves, but that's my experience. I lack power over my reactions to my life. And trigger management just doesn't work. I can say, well, the answer is don't put yourself in situations where you're going to get triggered, where you know you're going to react badly. And it simply doesn't work. Number one, you live in constant fear that your trigger management is not going to work, and you just never know. It's a vain and vague exercise in trying to bring to yourself a life that you will feel good about. So so in this depression at 10 years sober, and it lasted a year, and none of them were new feelings. Not that, the feelings were hating everything. I mean, not hating, but not liking anything, not feeling enthusiastic about not anything, not wanting to see people, not wanting to, I was laying in bed 20 hours a day. And what blew my mind is I never thought about drinking. I did think about suicide, but I never thought about drinking. That blew my mind. After drinking for as long as I drank, the solution to whatever problem I had, I found in alcohol. So what I learned was the true meaning of powerlessness over my reactions to my life. And I learned how hard I have to work on a daily basis, to live a different kind of life. And don't you know, it was in that depression or shortly afterward that all this Ignatian stuff started showing up. It actually showed up before, but I've gotten more and more involved, and I'm just convinced, for me personally, that this Ignatian, there's a moment in the big book where it says, so, when somebody lays out this kit of spiritual tools for us to use in our lives, the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius are a bunch of spiritual tools. The challenge is it's so deeply Christian, and regardless of whether it doesn't matter how you were brought up or what you were involved with as a young person. That creates a problem for many of us, and um, the whole Catholic thing that Jesus is the only Son of God, that just doesn't work for most of us. When the Ignatians are saying, "See God in everything," or the Big Book says, "God is either everything or else God is nothing. Which one am I going to choose?" It doesn't make any sense to single out this single person, to say he was closer to God than he had. I mean, if we put it in our terms, his conscious contact with whatever you call it was immense and was more significant than most of the people that had come before him. I mean, we don't know. How am I going to gauge somebody else's conscious contact? But the things he said, and then you got to remember how everything is getting translated, so that you don't know what he actually said. And boy, have I discovered that with these spiritual exercises. These things have been translated around 5,000 times in from the original Spanish and Latin to into different languages of the world. 5,000 times, and I've got probably a half dozen English translations. And don't you know, they are all different. And his writing style was, I don't know what to call it, formalistic. It's not an easy writing style, and it's led me to one translation that it doesn't matter now, but the left hand page is a traditional translation, the right hand page is a contemporary translation. But even then, the sentence structure and the way things are said is challenging. So what I worked on yesterday, and that sent to you all in by email, and I sent it two ways. I sent it PDF so you could print it if you like to print it. I'm old school, and I like pieces of paper. I do better with it. I can file them better. I can find them easier, and then I can look at it and whatever. And then I also sent it in the body of an email, and we're gonna go over it shortly. Um, so so I said earlier how much I appreciate your being here, because um, I wouldn't be doing all of this work if you weren't here. uh, and so and how much more challenging this is than the Big Book, because I'm coming from different sources. So the primary two sources are his autobiography and the spiritual exercises themselves. So there's the story of his life, and there are lots of lessons in the story of his life, and ways to go to specific events as you see how this formed what came out as the spiritual exercises. And then secondarily, we have the spiritual exercises. So and then you've got a whole body of stuff written around the spiritual exercises by a variety of people. So it's just much more challenging for me, and I haven't been able to. I'm really going theme to theme, and our theme this time is primary purpose, and um, and I'm trying to make a case that if you think about the primary purpose of your life, it will lead you to a way better experience of your life. And so what I'm about to do is just to contrast my challenges with primary purpose and um, and what Ignatius suggests, and what I'm trying to get into my daily life as often as I can. So one of the big lessons I feel I learned, by through the help of AA, examining my alcoholism, um, was that I'm saying this today. I did not feel this early on for sure, but I believe I have a human agenda, and I believe I have a spiritual agenda. And I hope as I grow older that the human agenda will fall in behind the spiritual agenda and contribute to it rather than take away from it. But I lived most of my life totally in my human agenda. And if you ask me, well, today, what is your spiritual agenda? I'm going to say, well, I'm working on it. Um, I'm working on it, and I think what I'm gaining a lot is Saint Ignatius is helping me as much as anything get to that spiritual agenda. My human agenda is pretty clear. Um, I'm into self-preservation. I'm into self-gratification, and I'm into self justification. And that means, first and foremost, I want to feel safe, and I want to live as long as I'm able to live. And I want to eat good food and exercise every day and do all the things that I'm supposed to do for my human health. Um, Self gratification is I want to feel good, and I know I've said in this setting before, I have been plagued by four questions all my life. How did I get here? What am I supposed to do while I'm here? What's going to happen when my body mind dies? And question number four, which has been the hardest, is why can't I feel better than I do? I feel horrible. Why can't I feel better than I do? And if you couple that with lack of power, I lack power to feel good. I lack power to have a positive response to my life. And why, for me, it has been so um, not well, maybe revolutionary, that what Ignatius says is, and I think the big book says this too, um, is that I've had as a goal or a primary purpose to feel good. I want to feel good. And Ignatius says, well, have at it. What I'm trying to tell you is if you will try to live in God's will for you, if you will do the stuff to get in sync with God, is the word that's commonly used, you will feel good. In fact, your feelings are can be an evaluation of your behavior. It's not that feeling good is a goal. It's that if you will do these things, you will feel good, whether it's a goal or not. And of course, then they go on to say, and sometimes, by the way, you're going to feel rotten, and it's a good thing. That's a novel concept. And I know I've quoted this line before. Bill Wilson went through this 11-year depression as he tried so hard he was doing all this work inside AA and the service structure and the individual groups and individual people and all this stuff. 11 years depression. And his own comment is two comments on that are relevant to us. And this is in that big book study guide that some of you have seen. Um, he says, I believe I went through these depressions uh, as a result of my failure to do all of the steps. Now, that's the way he says it. It just failure to do the steps. My thing is, I believe our way of life, the starting line for our work in AA is 10, 11, and 12 on a constant basis. That's the goal. We do this other stuff to get our minds more settled so we can actually interact with this higher power thing. We have to go through amends as part of that settling process, the quieting down process within, because you cannot hear the intuitive voice of the soul when your mind is super busy. And most of our minds are super busy just coping with our human lives on a day to day basis and all the demands of those human lives. So, developing a serious prayer and meditation practice is, and for me, that's the circle. You know, we have the circle and a triangle inside, and the triangle inside are meetings of our fellowship, our one-on-one work with each other, and our service, our commitments to service, which is one of our surefire, action-oriented antidotes to an excessively self-centered human personality. Most of us the books. Most of us are concerned with our, our petty, our stuff going on, our little plans and designs, our whatever's going on in the moment, and getting to ask the question, God, what is the primary purpose for my life? Why am I here? So I'm trying to distinguish this human agenda of self preservation, personal safety, feeling okay, self gratification, feeling better than okay, trying to get some pleasure into my life, and then self justification, the mental work of justifying my selfish, self centered behavior. I gotta justify why I'm doing this stuff. None of that's in the spiritual agenda. I mean, it is, but it's couched differently. You know, the soul is not concerned about its preservation. It's been around thousands of years, if you believe the work that's been done around that journey of souls. That this life that I'm living is why it's those readings are that we do at the beginning of this are so important. I am here for my soul's sake, not for my body and mind. You know, that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing to really grasp, especially when the needs and wants and fears and desires of the body and mind are so much clearer than why the soul is here. And it's so easy to get focused on the body and mind and not allow the soul to come forward. Um, so and prayer and meditation are the and service, but I mean prayer and meditation are what we need to do. And um, most of us, our prayer and meditation life is when we are able. It's 5 minutes here or there. Um, I will say that in my experience, um, longtime members of AA who are ready to claim a relationship with higher power have a fairly rigorous prayer life. They're doing, step 11 says, on awakening, here's what you do. As you go through the day, when you're agitated or doubtful, here's what you do. When retiring at night, here's what you do. And they give us a whole thing to do. And people that do that, they're the happiest people I've seen in AA. But how many of them? A meeting of 20 people, maybe one or two are, I mean, a number of people may be trying, but people that are devoted, dedicated to that, it's not a lot. And that's the other thing that the Jesuit mentality brings right away. They are they have these two things that I can't wait to get to. Is one is what they call the daily examine. It's a step 10. It's just their form of step 10. And there's a great little book about it, and we'll be talking about that as we move along. Um, is the daily examine, and this other thing is discernment of spirits. And it's very interesting to me that discernment of spirits is just like our spiritual appendix. It's an afterthought. He's done with the exercises, and now he's doing a bunch of supplemental material. And one of the first ones is discernment of spirits. And discernment of spirits, I believe, for me anyway, is discerning my spiritual agenda as opposed to my human agenda, and making sure that my human agenda lines up with my spiritual agenda, not the other way around. This is not an effort to align my spiritual agenda with my human agenda. This is to put my spiritual agenda first and see what happens. And I think that's what our book is saying. When you deal with a spiritual malady first, and the body and the mind will come along. You make that your priority, not the concerns and needs of the body and the mind. So let's see where I'm at here. Oh yeah, okay. So what I sent to you last night was annotation 21, 22, and 23, and I sent it so that you could look at it if you wanted to. You don't need to, but Robin asked several weeks ago, you're gonna do with the exercises what you did with the big book. I mean, I have this. It's awesome, if I do say so myself. It's 200 freaking pages now, and it pulls in a lot of stuff from all kinds of places, and I'm really proud of it in a way, because it hasn't been easy. It's been very positive for me, and it gives me a real thing with these. Anyway, I'm getting off. I am going to do something about these spiritual exercises, and it's going to include an outline of his life story, and it will include outline uh, of the spiritual exercises themselves. I mean, I can't wait in a way for you to. I mean, you may or may not. It may or may not take, but if it takes, you'll. I believe you'll get excited, because it's just he's putting into words. I I we'll see when we get there. Okay, so the spiritual exercises themselves, um, after the fact, they have been broken down into numbered paragraphs, and what they're typically called is annotations. And the beauty of this is that every paragraph has got a number. So when you're working with 3 or 4 English translations, there is no question where you're at, and you can see how differently one translator um, expressed an annotation from another translator, and then these contemporary things. So the exercises themselves start with preliminary annotations, and there are 20 preliminary annotations out of a total of 370. So my accountant mind, I can tell you that 6% of the total annotations are these preliminary things, and we're not talking about them today. We're going right to um, the first 3 annotations of what they call the first week. So the exercises themselves, these preliminary annotations, and then first week, second week, third week, and fourth week. And I'll talk more about that another time, because I want to get to these annotations. And then and that the first week is close to 20%. The second week is 26%. They're the bulk of the thing, are the first 2 weeks, and then there's a third week and a fourth week. And they don't mean, that's just the word he used. They mean period or section. It's still, but they have different focuses. The first week is focused on Jesus's early life, and by the time you get to the fourth week, it's the passion and the crucifixion and the resurrection as his guideline for doing these annotations. So 21, 22, and 23. 21 is actually the title, and I'm going to read it and talk about it. And bear in mind, this is uh, my version of a lot of other people's work. So you could read this one of these yourselves and say, I don't see that. And that's for me one of the real beauties of AA. Fundamental to our work in AA is this is only going to work if you are trying to form a relationship with a power greater than your mind and greater than your body that makes sense to you. If it doesn't make sense to you, it ain't going to work, is essentially what it's saying. Remember the first requirement for the third step prayer is that I have to quit playing God. Why? It doesn't say because that's against Scripture. That's not Jesus. That's a sin. It says you got to quit playing God because it does not work. It is not bringing you in your life what you feel that you want. And why it's so important that this stuff has got to it's got to work. The words have got to work for you. And why my sponsor was so good about teaching me to substitute words in any way I wanted, remove words, add words, substitute words in any way I wanted to what the book said. It's not, we don't say because it is written, this is the truth because it is written, and this is the only way to the truth, and all that kind of stuff. So the annotation 21 is um, a title, um, and and my version of this is the primary purpose of the spiritual exercises is to overcome self and to order our lives so that we can make decisions free from disordered desires. Now, one word they use is disordered affections. Another time it's another word that attachments. That's another one, from disordered attachments. The word disordered seems to appear often. I love the word disordered because it means two things to me. One, out of order. It's not in the right order. And two, it's out of order in the sense of it doesn't work. The bathroom is out of order. You can't go use this bathroom. So it's saying you got them in the wrong order, and it's saying they're not working anyway, or either way that you want. And then whether you say attachments, desires, affections, it doesn't matter, but it's something you feel like you want to do, and they're saying, well, maybe, but we don't think it works for you. And we think you you want to look at that and change what you're doing. And remember, this is a title. It's not even a statement in the way you read it. And then I'm adding a note if it's in parentheses. This is me compared to the primary purpose of the steps, which is to pray only for knowledge of God's will for us and praying only for the power to carry that out. Lack of power is always our dilemma. And the lack of power is not only over stuff out there, it's over stuff inside here. And gaining power is therefore what we're trying to do. And we use these spiritual tools and processes and thoughts and whatever to try to gain power. Annotation 22. In order to be of maximum help to each other, the giver of these exercises should give a good interpretation of the maker's statements rather than criticize them. If the giver cannot do that, the giver, should ask the maker to express themselves more fully. If the giver still believes that the maker is misguided, the giver should correct with love. And last, if that doesn't work, the giver should use every appropriate means to put the maker's statements to good use. So a couple of things show up in this. One is the big book is not written for the giver. Now, I'm a serious proponent of big book sponsorship, which means you use the big book to convey this information to another person and to tell them what to do when. Because it's directions, specific directions on what to do, on how to do the steps, at least in the middle. By the time you get to chapter 5, how it works, and chapter 6, into action, all of the steps 3 through 11 are in those two chapters, and they're fairly specific. And what blows my mind is those two chapters were written after the rest of the book. He wrote them at the end, not in the middle where they show up. The whole rest of the book is written in basically the order that it's presented, except 5 and 6 came at the end and got inserted there in the middle. When they were writing the book, they didn't even have 12 steps. The 12 steps came to him when he was trying to work on the beginning of chapter 5. Okay, so but the spiritual exercises are written for the giver, the sponsor, not for the sponsee. So the sponsor saying, okay, here's what I want you to do. But they would call him a spiritual director. And the other person is the directee or the exhortant, gets lots of different names. I like this is giver and maker. So the maker is the one doing the work. The giver is the one supervising the maker doing the work. And what he's saying here, now, of course, they say, we're assuming you're a good Christian, which means you're going to try to put a good spin on what the other ridiculous, stupid person is doing. You're going to try to put a good interpretation on that. And the things that Ignatius, this guy was a military guy. This guy was a hard ass. And yet, when you get to the exercises, he is as gentle as can be. And I love that. So in order for this thing to work, you got to be a good Christian and put a good interpretation, no matter what this person you're trying to help, no matter what ridiculous stuff they say or do. So that's the first thing. If you don't understand what they're saying and you're ready to tell them, you may as well quit right now, um, ask them to express themselves more fully. And if you still think they're just off the beam, totally out of it, correct with love. I just love that. If you still think they're wrong, correct with love. And if that doesn't work, do everything you can to put a positive interpretation on it. So that's one of the first things he's saying specifically about this work. Annotation 23, and they call it principle and foundation. I'm calling it primary purpose. Um, and these are different words than what you hear. And the primary purpose of our lives is to trust, love, and serve God, our Lord and Creator, and thereby save our souls. And I'm putting in parenthesis for soul, to save our souls, do the work our souls came here to do. Our souls don't need saving. They are not born in original sin. They come into a human life and they struggle with the human agenda. At least this is my view. And nothing is wrong. It's just the soul is not being allowed to grow and develop and learn in the way that was intended. Now, I've often expressed my confusion that because my human agenda is so strong, and clear to me what it wants and how it feels, it's talking to me all the time. Um, and the voice of the soul is so soft. If you ask me what's the primary purpose of your life, I'll tell you about my retirement and my boat and my relationship and my kids and the town I live in, all that stuff. You ask me, well, why is your soul incarnated here in your body? I don't know. Beats the hell out of me. I don't know. And what I love about this is it's allowing me to get into the mystery of it. And I'm a teller. Here I am telling you. I tend to dictate to the world what's going on, and this puts me way back, like, I don't know. But I think that is the work, is for me to try to ask and receive answers to that. Um, all the things of this earth are created to help you pursue this end. Everything else around here is to help you save your soul or do the work that your soul came here to do. And this is a real Al-Anon statement. He's saying, therefore, use the things of creation, and things of creation, I just put a note here, includes objects, relationships, situations. Use these as long as they are helpful toward this end. So having a primary purpose is that's your goal, to trust, love, and serve your creator. The typical translation is praise, reverence, and serve your creator. I'm trying to get to, or honor, praise, and serve your creator. For me, words that work a little bit better are trust, love, and serve. So let's see. So therefore, use the things of creation as long as they help you toward this end, and free yourselves from them if they're obstructing your to this end. To do this, we must make ourselves impartial toward all created things. Impartial is another word that's not attached to these things. Indifferent is a word that shows up a lot, and indifferent has a coldness to it, so you'll find some translations avoiding it. Um, to do this, we must make ourselves impartial toward all created things, to the degree that we are not under any prohibition to the contrary. It sounds like a legal statement, but he's saying in some cases, based on your vocation or your vows or your whatever, you don't really have a choice. So we're not talking about where you don't really have a choice. Um, in these other situations, we should not desire and seek health more than sickness. We should not desire and seek wealth more than poverty. We should not desire and seek fame more than disgrace. We should not desire and seek a long life more than a short one. Are you freaking kidding me? Really? That doesn't make any sense at all to people living in this human world in the US of A. It's contrary to any advertising you've ever heard. Um, but what I think he's trying to say is your soul's experience here is what matters, not your body and mind's experience here. And if that helps you to let go of certain things, and to be more fully here, wonderful. That will be helpful. Um, and I love it. Um, Fame more than disgrace. We should not seek fame. This guy was seeking fame for the first 30 years of his life. That was his primary purpose. He wanted fame. And here he's saying during these things that that's not the goal. All right, we've gotten to our time, so I'm gonna let's see. I think I can. You already have it there, Anne Marie. Stop the recording.